In a quiet corner of Wyoming, where the open spaces allowed for roomy apartments even for those with a modest budget, I found myself in a small yet comfortable home. It was 2022, a year that carried the promise of new beginnings, and I was enjoying the peace that my humble abode offered. Spring ushered in a relentless series of rainstorms, a backdrop of constant drumming that seemed to echo the collective heartbeat of the town. On one such rainy Sunday, as the day was slowly giving way to the evening, I was nestled in my living room, lost in the world of television dramas, the rain providing a steady soundtrack to my lazy day. But around 7 in the evening, an unexpected knock pulled me out of my reverie. The sound was almost swallowed by the rain, a hesitant disturbance that seemed oddly out of place. Opening the door, I found a young man, his late 20s perhaps, soaked to the bone and wearing a look of desperation. He spun a tale of a camping trip gone wrong, a series of unfortunate events that led him to my doorstep, seeking shelter from the unforgiving rain. Despite the logical explanation, a sense of foreboding clawed at me, urging caution. I offered him a phone to arrange a ride, an offer he declined before disappearing into the rainy abyss, leaving a trail of uneasy thoughts in his wake. Trying to shake off the unsettling encounter, I returned to my TV show, but the image of the man, lost and desperate, haunted the edges of my mind. Hours ticked by, the sky deepened to a rich black canvas, punctuated by the relentless rain that seemed to grow heavier as the night progressed. Suddenly, a flickering glow caught my attention, pulling my focus from the screen to the eerie scene unfolding in my backyard. Through the heavy curtain of rain, I could see a small campfire struggling against the downpour, a lone figure standing nearby, holding an object that was hard to discern from the distance. The sight sent a chill down my spine, a sense of impending doom settling in my stomach. With trembling hands, I dialed the police, my voice breaking as I relayed the unsettling sight in my backyard. The dispatcher's voice, steady and calm, promised a quick response, but I knew deep down that help would take time to arrive in my remote location. As I ended the call, a heart-stopping realization dawned upon me. The figure was gone, the fire now a lone sentinel in the dark, rainy night. Panic surged as I heard footsteps approaching, a sound that seemed to echo ominously, growing louder, closer, until I could see him. The stranger from earlier, now armed with a hunting rifle, his intentions unclear but undoubtedly sinister. Fear propelled me into action, a frantic rush to secure my home, my heartbeat pounding in my ears, drowning out the sound of the rain. The next moments were a blur of terror, the violent pounding on my door echoing the frantic beating of my heart, each strike sounding more desperate, more violent. But then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The silence that followed was deafening, the only sound the steady drumming of the rain, a reminder of the night's dread. Minutes felt like hours as I waited, paralyzed by fear, until I finally dared to look out, finding an empty porch, the yard bearing the marks of his presence, a chilling testament to the danger that had lurked so close. When the police arrived, they unearthed a horrifying discovery near the campfire site, a duffel bag containing tools that spoke of violent intentions, a premeditated plan of horror that sent shivers down my spine. As I recount this tale, the mystery of the stranger looms large, a haunting presence in my life, a face that appears in the quiet moments, a constant reminder of the danger that once stood at my doorstep, a mystery unsolved, leaving a lingering question: who was he and what did he truly want? The rainy night remains etched in my memory, a symphony of echoing fears, a night where every drop of rain carried whispers of what could have been, a chilling reminder of the thin line between safety and danger, a line that was almost crossed. In the sprawling heart of Montana, where the vast plains stretch endlessly and the town's heartbeat is slow and rhythmic, I found solace in a spacious apartment. It was 2022, and while the world outside was a whirlwind of change, here in this quiet corner, time seemed to move at its own leisurely pace. The apartment complex, a relic from the 70s, had seen better days, its once vibrant paint now chipped, revealing the stories of countless tenants before me. My apartment was on the 3rd floor, offering a panoramic view of the town and the vast wilderness beyond. The building had its quirks: creaky floorboards, windows that sometimes jammed, and a peculiar echo in the hallways that made footsteps sound like they were coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Autumn's embrace brought with it not just the golden hues, but also nights where fog would roll in, thick and impenetrable. The streetlights would cast an eerie glow, their light barely piercing the fog, creating an atmosphere of a town suspended in time. The rain would often join, its droplets playing a melancholic tune on the rooftops and streets. One evening, as the rain began its relentless descent and the fog grew denser, I settled into my favorite armchair, a book in hand and a cup of cocoa on the table beside me. The rhythmic tapping of the rain and the soft glow of my lamp created the perfect ambience. The world outside seemed distant, muffled by the fog and rain. But then, a hesitant knock broke the tranquility. It was so soft that I almost believed I'd imagined it. But then it came again, more persistent this time. Opening the door, I was met with the sight of a woman. Her long, wet hair clung to her face, raindrops trickling down, merging with the tears on her cheeks. Her eyes, a deep shade of green, held stories of sorrow and mystery. Her attire, though drenched, spoke of a time long past with its vintage design and faded colors. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly from the cold. "I'm lost, and the fog, it's disorienting." I nodded, stepping aside. "Of course, it's no night to be out there." She introduced herself as Ilara. Her car had broken down a few miles away, and the fog had disoriented her. She had been wandering for what felt like hours before spotting the light from my window. There was a vulnerability in her voice, but also an underlying strength. "Thank you for letting me in," she said, her eyes scanning the room. "It's been a long night." Inviting her in, I offered her a change of clothes and some warm food. As the night progressed, Ilara began sharing tales of her travels. She spoke of ancient towns hidden in mountains, of moonlit dances in forgotten forests, and of love stories that spanned centuries. But as the clock ticked on, her stories took a darker turn. She whispered tales of shadowy figures that lurked in the fog, of voices that whispered promises of doom, and of a curse that had haunted her family for generations. The room, with its dim lighting and the storm raging outside, seemed to come alive with her tales. The night wore on, and the boundary between reality and Ilara's tales began to blur. Was she merely a stranded traveler, or was she a living embodiment of the stories she narrated? As dawn approached, the storm began to subside. Ilara, looking out of the window, whispered her thanks and made her way to the door. As she stepped out, she turned back, her green eyes reflecting the first light of dawn. "Remember the tales, for they are as real as the rain." The memory of that stormy night became a tale of its own. The identity of Ilara, her haunting stories, and the eerie atmosphere of that night remained an enigma. And every time the rain taps on my window, I can't help but wonder if Ilara would return, bringing with her more tales from the heart of the storm. Months later, as autumn leaves began to blanket the town, a peculiar letter arrived. The envelope was a faded shade of ivory, its edges worn and frayed as if it had traveled through time itself. Inside, the paper was yellowed, bearing the distinct aroma of old books. Written in elegant cursive with a touch of flourish was a message from Ilara. She expressed her gratitude for the shelter I'd provided and subtly mentioned an old photograph tucked away in the archives of the town library. Intrigued, I decided to visit the library the very next day. The building itself was a relic, with towering wooden shelves and a silence that seemed almost sacred. After hours of searching, tucked between old newspapers and forgotten town records, I stumbled upon a black and white photograph. The image sent chills down my spine. It was Ilara, unmistakably so. But the date scribbled at the back read 1975. She stood by the town's old fountain, the same dress flowing around her, the same intricate braid in her hair, and that same enigmatic smile. The surroundings in the photo, the people, the cars, all belonged to an era long gone, but Ilara looked exactly as I remembered her from that rainy night. A librarian, noticing my pale face, approached and remarked, "Ah, you found the town's mystery lady. Legend says she appears once every few decades, always on a rainy night, always seeking shelter. No one knows who she is or where she comes from." I left the library with more questions than answers. Was the Ilara I met just a figment of my imagination, a ghost from the past, or something even more inexplicable? The town's whispers about the mysterious lady echoed in my ears, and the enigma of that night deepened, leaving me in a state of perpetual wonder. Of a mid-sized town in Rocheport, nestled between the vast plains and looming mountains, I've spent most of my life. The appeal? The vast stretches of land that one could own without burning a hole in their pocket. I had a quaint little house, not grand by any means, but it was perfect for someone like me who cherished solitude. It was the spring of 2018, and the town was experiencing an unusually prolonged rainy season. Almost every evening the skies would open up, drenching everything in sight. On one such evening, after a particularly tiring day at work, I decided to visit a local diner for a quick meal. The rain was pouring outside, and the diner, with its warm lights and the aroma of freshly baked pies, felt like a haven. As I was enjoying my meal, around 7 p.m., the doorbell chimed, signaling the entry of a new customer. Through the misted windows, I could see a man, probably in his late 20s, drenched from head to toe. He took a seat at the counter a few stools away from me. There was something peculiar about him. His clothes looked outdated, like they were from a different era, and he had this distant, lost look in his eyes. The waitress approached him. "What can I get you, hon?" "Just a coffee, black," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. As he sipped his coffee, our eyes met, and he started a conversation. He mentioned how he was passing through town, how the rain had caught him off guard while he was hiking in the nearby woods, and how he was looking for a place to crash for the night. I suggested a few motels, but he seemed reluctant. "I don't have much money on me," he admitted. Feeling a bit sympathetic and maybe against my better judgment, I offered him my couch for the night. He gratefully accepted. We drove to my house, the rain accompanying us all the way. We talked about mundane things, the weather, the town, and a bit about our personal lives. He mentioned his name was Eli. Once home, I set up the couch for him, gave him some dry clothes, and we both retired for the night. The rain's pitter-patter against the windows was oddly comforting. The next morning, I woke up to find Eli gone. On the kitchen counter was a note, "Thanks for your kindness." At midnight, a few days after Eli's departure, the rhythmic patter of rain was interrupted by the unmistakable sound of shuffling footsteps downstairs. My heart raced as I remembered the handgun I kept under my bed for safety. I grabbed it, trying to steady my shaking hands. As I tiptoed downstairs, I heard muffled voices. To my shock, I found two intruders rummaging through my belongings. But what truly froze me in place was the sight of Eli grappling with one of the intruders, while the other seemed to be shouting at them both. "Eli," I whispered, disbelief clouding my judgment for a moment. The distraction was enough. Eli managed to knock one of the intruders off balance, sending him crashing into a bookshelf. The other intruder, seeing me armed and realizing they were outnumbered, made a hasty retreat, dragging his accomplice with him. Eli, panting heavily, turned to me, his eyes reflecting a mix of relief and concern. "I saw them lurking around earlier tonight," he said, his voice strained. "I had a bad feeling and decided to keep an eye on your place." I was still in shock, trying to process everything. "Why would they target my house?" I asked. Eli looked around, his gaze settling on a family heirloom displayed in the living room. "Could be they thought it was worth something. There's been a string of robberies in the area recently." We spent the next few hours securing the house, making sure every window and door was locked. Eli, despite having left days ago, decided to stay the night to ensure my safety. The next morning, the police arrived, taking statements and looking for any evidence the intruders might have left behind. Eli, ever the enigma, slipped away before they arrived, leaving me with more questions than answers. Every rainy night as I sit in my home, I can't help but think of Eli and the unexpected turn that evening took. The raindrops seem to echo the events of that night, and I'm left wondering about the mysterious man who twice entered my life during a storm. In the heart of the Ozarks, Missouri, I've lived in a secluded house surrounded by dense woods for the past 31 years. The vast stretches of wilderness and the serenity of nature have always been my sanctuary. My buddy Jake lived a few miles away, and we often spent evenings sharing stories by the fireplace. In 2020, as the world grappled with the COVID-19 pandemic, Jake and I had planned to self-isolate together, away from the chaos of the cities. The Ozarks seemed like the perfect escape from the virus that was wreaking havoc everywhere. However, a week before our planned isolation, Jake tested positive for the virus and had to quarantine at his place. I had already stocked up on supplies, and the woods were calling, so I decided to stay put and isolate alone. The days were overcast, with the forecast predicting rain for the entire week. The news was filled with rising infection rates, and the eerie silence outside was occasionally broken by the distant sound of sirens. One evening, as the rain began to pour, I settled into my living room, turning on Netflix, trying to distract myself from the grim reality. just as I was getting engrossed in a post-apocalyptic series, the doorbell rang. Given the pandemic and the remoteness of my location, it was highly unexpected. I paused the show and cautiously approached the door, mask in hand. But when I opened it, there was no one there. Only the wet footprints on my porch hinted at a recent visitor. A sense of unease settled over me. I looked around, trying to catch a glimpse of the unexpected visitor, but the dense rain and the darkness made it impossible to see far. I closed the door, locking it, and returned to my show, trying to shake off the eerie feeling. However, just as I was getting engrossed in the series again, I heard a soft, deliberate rustling outside. My heart raced as I remembered the shotgun I kept for emergencies. Peeking out of the window, I saw a man, drenched from the rain, trying to break into my shed. Before I could react, he noticed me and froze. Our eyes locked for what felt like an eternity. Then, without a word, he bolted into the woods, disappearing into the night. I was too shaken to continue watching Netflix, so I stayed up, keeping the lights on, every sound amplifying my paranoia. Morning couldn't come soon enough. As the first light broke, I inspected the shed. The man had taken some of my supplies, including masks and sanitizers. Determined not to let this ruin my peace, I continued with my daily routine. But as evening approached, the unease returned. That night, as the rain continued its relentless pour, I heard whispers, multiple voices discussing, plotting. I strained to listen, but the rain made it hard to discern the words. Suddenly, a scream echoed, sending chills down my spine. I grabbed my shotgun and flashlight, stepping out into the rain. The beam of my flashlight caught 3 figures near my shed. 2 men were holding the man from the previous night, his face showing pure terror. They seemed to be in a heated argument. Spotting my light, they immediately scattered in different directions. I rushed to the man they had been holding. He was shaken but unharmed. He introduced himself as Max and explained that he was part of a group that had been tracking the other 2 men, suspected of hoarding essential supplies during the pandemic. He had been caught while trying to retrieve stolen items. Together, Max and I decided to report the incident to the local authorities. The experience was a stark reminder of the unpredictability of not just nature, but the desperate times we were living in. Every time the rain pours now, I remember that eerie night and the unexpected allies and enemies I found in the heart of the Ozarks during the pandemic. The outskirts of New York, where the relentless energy of the city fades into the tranquil embrace of nature, was where I sought refuge after the war. The old colonial house, nestled amidst dense woods and overlooking a serene lake, became my sanctuary. Its worn-out bricks and creaky wooden floors held a charm that whispered of simpler times. After my tour in Afghanistan, where an IED took my leg and left me with a prosthetic, the solitude of this place was what I craved. The rain especially had a therapeutic effect on me. It seemed to wash away the haunting memories, even if just for a while. One evening, as a storm brewed and rain began its rhythmic dance on the roof, I settled into my worn-out couch. The dim glow from the fireplace cast shadows on the walls as I streamed a documentary about my unit's time in Afghanistan. The faces of friends, some no longer with us, stared back from the screen, a stark reminder of the price of war. Midway through, a knock echoed through the house. It was odd given the remoteness of my location. I wheeled myself to the door, peering through the peephole. All I saw was the rain-soaked wilderness. Thinking it was just the wind, I returned to my documentary, but then another knock, more urgent this time. Opening the door, I found an old army boot, caked in mud and worn from use. A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just any boot. It was eerily similar to the one I'd lost in that explosion. I brought it inside, placing it by the fireplace, hoping to dry and inspect it further. As the night deepened, the house seemed to come alive. Whispers floated through the corridors, recounting tales of ambushes, close calls, and that fateful day of the explosion. Doors creaked open, footsteps echoed, and the cold wind carried voices of my fallen comrades. The television, which I was sure I had turned off, flickered back to life. It showed grainy footage from the war, scenes that seemed all too familiar, yet ones I had never recorded. The faces of my friends, especially those who didn't make it back, stared hauntingly from the screen. Their voices, filled with pain and accusation, seemed to ask, "Why did you survive?" Terrified, I decided to confront this haunting. Taking the muddy boot, I went outside, placing it at the edge of the woods, hoping it would serve as a peace offering. As I sat in the living room waiting, a voice clear and familiar whispered close, "It's not your fault, mate. We never blame you." Morning came with the chirping of birds and the gentle warmth of sunlight filtering through the trees. The boot had vanished. The weight in my heart felt a tad lighter, but the memories remained, a constant reminder of the sacrifices made. I later discovered from the local townsfolk that my house was built on an old military training ground used during the World Wars. Many soldiers had trained there, some never returning from their wars. The rain, it seemed, had a way of awakening the past, allowing me to confront my demons and find a semblance of peace amidst the haunting memories. In the shadows of the night, if our tales from unsettling horror stories gave you a fright, press like and let it be known. Subscribe so you're never alone in this haunting journey, and share so others too can be wary. Until our next sinister tale, stay dark, dear listener.